Fantastic. Well, let's kick it off. So welcome everyone to our special edition Pacific Sooner, Safer, Happier meetup. We've got myself, Maria Muir, who leads here for Asia Pacific for Sooner, Safer, Happier. I've said it a few times in a couple of meetups, and I've got some familiar faces here, but we are absolutely on a mission to enable a movement to help organizations to deliver better outcomes and to create a more humane world of work. I am joined today with the 4 authors of the Sooner, Safer, Happier book. So John, Simon, Zsolt, and Myles. And so before we kick it off, I just wanted to acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional owners of the land. We are all coming here from various bits of the land. I'm from Melbourne, so that is the Wurundjeri people here. And I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So if you care to share where you are coming and zooming in from, please, by all means, do so in the chat. We will be using the chat to facilitate the questions as we go and to have a bit of a two-way conversation. The way that we're going to run our 1 hour today is we'll kick off with a bit of a fun and exciting poll just to warm us all up. And then the authors will tell us about the patterns from the Sooner, Safer, Happier book. I hope that everyone knows what book we are referring to, and that's why you are here today. And then we've got lots of time for Q&A. So whether it's, insights, reflections on the book that you'd like to share, or questions, by all means, that is what we're here for. So please use the chat as you are. Thank you for letting me know where you are from. So let's kick off with the poll. I hope everyone can see that. All right, I might give everyone 10 more seconds to fill it out. I've got roughly 63% of you who have done it, so thank you for that. So we'll leave it open just for a tiny bit more, just to get the last little bit, but I think we've got a fairly good cross-section to give the authors a bit of a heads up around who we've got in the room with us today. All right, with 80%, 82, fantastic. I think that's good enough for me. So to share the results, so John, Myles, Zsolt, Simon, who we've got in the room today in terms of people that have read the book, 13% more than once. So, and then yes, 37%, and then a handful that are currently reading it. So fantastic. And then 21% that need a copy. Please message me in the chat if you do need a copy. I can sort that out for you or help you with that. And maybe you'll get a bit of inspiration from the session today about the patterns. In terms of what is their favorite pattern, we've got an interesting mix. So 53% on pattern number 1, so focus on outcomes. And the nice then split between achieve big through small, leadership will make it or break it, build the right thing, continuous improvement, and then learning organization. So you can see where people have a little bit of a love for the patterns. In terms of where our audience is having challenges with applying the patterns, we've got the majority in leadership behavior. Leadership will make it or break it as the front runner. And then number 2, creating a learning organization as number 2. So maybe heads up as we're talking about those ones. If there's some ninja moves that we can share, that would be great on those 2. And then lastly, what pattern are you finding success in? Is pattern number 1. Maybe this is why it's the favorite. Focus on outcomes, with 50% being the front runner. And then pattern number 2, continuous improvement as the next ones. Awesome. Thank you everyone for that. Let me just stop sharing that now. And I will now hand over to John to take us through, whiz through the patterns with the rest of the authors. And then please put your questions in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Maria. Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. So my name is John Smart, and I guess we'll start with some introductions from the 4 authors. So I've been an agile and lean practitioner since the early 1990s. Before it was called agile, it was called lightweight processes at the time versus heavyweight processes, which was Prince 2 or Prince. And throughout my career, I've taken teams on the journey from traditional big batch, role silo based ways of working to working with more agility. And I have spent all of my career in financial services. And then that led up to me leading ways of working across Barclays Bank globally. So that was across 120,000 people with a presence in 40 countries. And that was leading across the entire organization at the group level with 5 business units. And that's where myself, Myles, Simon and Zsolt, that's where we worked together. And that's also where Sooner, Safer, Happier comes from. So Sooner, Safer, Happier, the book, the writing, it comes from our experience doing this at large organizations together. It's also, not only is it our own personal learnings the hard way and making mistakes ourselves, it is also learnings from about 100 other organizations as well. So after Barclays, that's when we wrote the book. I then did a couple of years leading business agility at Deloitte, and we are now running Sooner, Safer, Happier, the company, and we're helping large companies on the ways of working journey. So that's me. Myles?
Hi, just a quick one. I have spent my career leading change in a variety of different industries, partly in consulting, but also in financial services, also in manufacturing. Through that, I started out right at the beginning of my career doing, even before PMI and Prince, some classic project management stuff, and then fairly swiftly learned that really wasn't going to work for either me or my teams. So as I got more familiar with agility, really have moved towards that space. And for 13 years at Barclays, I was leading ways of working since 2015 in the investment bank, and together with John and the team, group wide was helping to improve things there. Since then, I've been consulting both in Deloitte and now at Sooner, Safer, Happier. I'll hand over to Simon.
Thanks, Myles. Hi, I'm Simon. I'm a software engineer. I still am. I've been at this for a few decades now. I picked up agility a little later than John in 1999 when somebody pointed me the Extreme Programming White Book, again, still before it was called Agile, and I embraced it wholeheartedly. It really talked to me. Since then, I've been passionate about it. I was at Barclays for 15 years, feeling frustrated in many ways, doing everything from hands-on architecture all the way up to chief architect in wealth management. And then I was lucky enough to be able to join John, Zsolt and Myles in actually living the passion for agility. Since then, I moved to Denmark as part of my Brexit escape plan. I now head up enterprise technology architecture and ways of working at Saxo Bank in Copenhagen. Thanks. Zsolt?
Nice to meet you all. I'm Zsolt Berend. I'm a business agility coach, trainer and practitioner. Started early 2000. My agility journey in Pennsylvania in healthcare. We had a large organization, dysfunctional, and started running Scrum and different practices. I had a variety of role, engineering background as well. Met John, Simon, and Myles at Barclays. We spent years together. It was lovely, and we learned a lot together. So it's reflected in the book. Currently with Sooner Safer Happier and Nationwide Building Society, working on the journey of creating a learning organization supported by dashboard data with the working data. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Zsolt. Okay, so we're going to share with you the top 8 patterns and anti-patterns. So this is in line with the chapters in the book. In terms of the language of anti-patterns and patterns, I like this language because anti-patterns will generally give you a headwind and they will make a hard job harder. But it doesn't mean it's impossible, because there is no one size fits all. Every organization is unique. There is no cookie cutter. There is no playbook. If anyone offers you a playbook, be wary is my personal view. Patterns will generally give you a tailwind and will make a hard job slightly less hard, but it's still a hard job. And there may be some situations where, in extreme cases, what's an anti-pattern for 95% of companies might actually be a pattern for 5% of companies. One example is an organization that had 6 months of cash flow left before going bust. You might take an anti-pattern type approach in that scenario. For a large organization that doesn't have a 6-month cash flow runway left, the approach you take might be considered an anti-pattern. So the key thing here is there isn't one size fits all. Context counts, but anti-patterns generally will give you a headwind and patterns will generally give you a tailwind. So we're going to do a kind of a short version. This will be about kind of 10 to 15 minutes, quick run through of the key patterns, and then we'll have Q&A. The number one lesson learned is focus on the outcomes first and foremost. So I was glad to see this was one of the most highly voted patterns in the poll in terms of the thing you're having success with. The lesson learned here is the mistake that I made. So personally, I was head of the agile transformation. We were calling it an agile transformation. The anti-pattern here is capital A, capital T, doing agile, measuring all the wrong things, measuring how many people have done agile training, how many agile teams do we have, how many product owners do we have, how many people are doing stand-ups, how many people have a cadence. No. That does not necessarily equal better outcomes. Case in point, Symbian, Nokia Mobile, they went bust. They were doing large-scale Scrum, and they were doing Scrum really well. But doing Scrum really well didn't save Symbian. We saw the same thing. At the end of year one, doing this across 100,000 people, at the end of year one, we did not see the outcomes significantly improve. Now, the good news is that we were measuring the outcomes so we could tell. There's lots of organizations that aren't even measuring the outcomes, so can't even tell. It's purely, subjective and anecdotal. So at the end of year one, we pivoted, and we pivoted to, this is the end of year one at Barclays, we pivoted to words along the lines of better value, sooner, safer, happier. The first version of those words was better products, faster. We changed the word products to value. We changed the word faster to sooner. And that's because it's not about being a feature factory. It's not about faster for the sake of faster. It's about minimizing time to learning. So this is the third version of the words, better value, sooner, safer, happier. Well, a quick double click, take a look at what those words mean. So better is quality, and that depends on your context. That could be reconciliation breaks. It could be manual keying errors. It could be IT incidents. This is not just IT. Just to clarify, this is whole organization. So quality is any unplanned failure demand, and any kind of work where you're having to redo stuff. Value is unique. It's in the eyes of the beholder. I believe that measuring value through OKRs is a good approach. The KR, key results, measure your leading and lagging value. Sooner is the heart of Agile and Lean. It is time to learning, time to value, so that you can pivot. Lead time is concept to cash. It's from the time you commit to doing some work to getting it into the hands of the consumer. Throughput is a count of items of value, and flow efficiency is the amount of time that work is being worked on versus the end-to-end lead time. Flow efficiency, most organizations are not measuring flow efficiency. It's one of the most important measures. Most organizations have a flow efficiency of 10% or less for knowledge work. That means work is waiting 90% of the time, which is frankly shocking. If this was physical, if this was a manufacturing floor, you'd see the inventory stacked up at the machines. But because it's knowledge work, if we don't visualize the work, we don't see it stacked up, which is why visualization is so important. Safer is continuous compliance, agile, not fragile. This is data privacy, information security, anti-money laundering, fraud, compliance, any regulatory things you have to comply to in your industry, any internal policies and standards. It's mandatory type work. And then happier is happier customers, colleagues, citizens, and climate, because improving ways of working is not at any cost to society or to the planet. And this is, for me, this is where I get my purpose from. It's about creating a more humane world of work, going from the, division of labor, first industrial revolution, Taylorism, people are just a cog in a machine and people are called resources, to people have brains. And actually everyone bringing their brain to work rather than being told what to do. So the size of the prize, the benefits we've seen, and this was after 3.5 years across tens of thousands of people, we saw a 20 times improvement on quality, 20 times reduction in failure demand. We saw, on average, a 3 times improvement on time to value and time to learning. So the 85th percentile lead time was 3 times quicker in a histogram of lead times, millions of lead times. The best teams were 20 times quicker. So that's for the best teams, that's 20 times less sunk cost fallacy, 20 times quicker to pivot. Safer, we saw a positive compliance trend. We saw a reduced impact radius. If something went wrong, it was a whimper rather than a bang. And speaking to subject matter experts in information security, data privacy, compliance, they had gone from firefighting to now being proactive, working with the product teams. And we saw the highest colleague engagement score since records began and a positive client net promoter score trend. So like I said, for me, happier colleagues is enough of a tick in the box. More humane world of work. The anti-pattern is agile for the sake of agile, lean for the sake of lean, DevOps for the sake of DevOps. Agile and lean and DevOps and so on are a means to an end. They are not the end. So my advice is, don't call it an agile transformation. Maybe even minimize the use of the A word, agile. It isn't about agile. It's about the outcomes. And this is what I advise you measure. My recommendation in terms of what to measure is what's on the screen right now. Better, value, sooner, safer, happier. Quality, value, time to value, safety, and happiness. And what we've done in the past is we've created, and not even in the past, but currently, create a dashboard for this. This is kind of Zsolt's area of expertise, where we create a dashboard to visualize the trends, look at correlations, and so on. Number 2 is achieve big through small. Think big, start small, learn fast. That's the pattern. The anti-pattern is think big, start big, learn slow. The anti-pattern is doing a big bang. Instead, start small. The reason for that is people, us, we have a limited velocity to unlearn and relearn. You have to go at the pace of unlearning. What determines the speed of unlearning? Psychological safety. So if you want to go faster, the best thing you can do is to nurture a culture of psychological safety. That's the best thing you can do with experimentation and the ability to fail fast. And it's an S-curve adoption. So this is how humans embrace change. S-curve, keep the gradient to change low to start with, get it working, get some social proof, and then you can start to accelerate. So it's maybe 1 team, 2 teams, 3 teams, 4 teams, 5 teams, then it's 5, 10, 15, 20, then it's 20, 30, 40, 50, then it's 100, 200, 300. So you can increase the gradient over time. Number 3 is invite over inflict. The anti-pattern is to inflict an agile transformation on people. And you leave work on Friday, you're a project manager, and you start work on Monday, you're a product owner, and you've got job insecurity. There's a number of organizations where I've heard the story where people are, I don't know if I still have a future. We've got this big bang coming, you know, we're going to have a reset on Monday. It's not good. It drives fear. From a neuroscience perspective, it pushes people into their lizard brain, into the amygdala, and you literally dumb down. You literally become less intelligent because you're using your lizard brain, because you're in a fight or flight situation. So it's not appealing to intrinsic motivation. It is extrinsic motivation, and you will get some silent sabotage, and you might get some not silent sabotage. People feel threatened. You get some lots of negative behaviors. So you have to invite participation and appeal to intrinsic motivation. One size does not fit all. Every organization is unique. And so that means basically the anti-pattern there is picking one agile scaling framework and inflicting it across the entire organization. And the diffusion of innovation point, that's Everett Rogers, 1962, diffusion of innovation. It's a normal distribution. You have innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and then laggards. So the learning here is identify your innovators, get behind them, prove it in your context. Don't waste time convincing the laggards, the critics, of anything. The words convince and resistance should not enter your vocabulary if you're going about change the right way. Number 4 is leadership behavior will make it or break it. I saw this was one of the biggest challenges in the poll. And there's very few things that I think are binary, but this one's quite strongly worded. Leadership behavior will make it or break it. And I think it is that binary. You know, leadership, and this is not pointing your finger up and like them as leaders. This is you as a leader. This is everybody as a leader. This is leaders at all levels in all roles. Someone who's just joined your organization from school or college or university can be a leader. The key behaviors here, number 1, role model. Role model the behaviors you expect in others. Number 2, psychological safety. Number 3, servant leadership. Supporting lines over reporting lines. Dear team, how can I help you? How can I remove impediments from out of your path? And an emergent mindset, which is treating the future as if it is not knowable. The opposite of an emergent mindset is a deterministic mindset. So with an emergent mindset, we're going to run experiments and we're going to have outcome hypotheses. Number 5 is build the right thing. So this is the pivot from output to outcomes. This is the pivot from role-based silos with work passing to multidisciplinary teams and value streams. So soonest time to value and learning. Usually the biggest impediment is role-based silos. So this is coming together, aligned to the flow of value, long-lived teams on long-lived products, aligned to the customer, and a focus on outcomes rather than output. And so be wary of the word velocity. It's not about how many arrows we've fired per minute. Instead, it's have we achieved the outcome?
Thanks, John. The next pattern is around governance, risk, and compliance. So this is building the thing right, building in quality and safety from the outset, as opposed to factoring in at the end, doing rework and additional cost of delays there. The patterns here that we've seen is creating safety within safety. So when governance and compliance leaders say to me, I have seen the most extraordinarily long approval trails that are absolutely meaningless. Long approval trails are a sign of a lack of safety. People do not have the psychological safety to agree with a particular risk mitigation is enough. So there's a pattern here around safety within safety. There's a pattern around organizing your specialist governance, risk, and compliance areas towards your value streams. So long-lived safety teams that are analogous to value streams. They have all the skills in them needed to advise the value stream about the risks that they may encounter. And the third pattern here is to do with a minimum viable compliance process. So keeping very clear guardrails, but a very lightweight process that ensures that interaction between long-lived safety teams and the value streams that they're working with is auditable and clear and simple. That engagement is happening.
Thanks, Myles. So chapter 7, pattern and anti-pattern 7 is about continuous improvement. The chapter is titled Continuous Attention to Technical Excellence. Somebody asked, what would we change? I'd probably change that these days to socio-technical excellence. It's about ensuring that you're not just a feature factory. If you're delivering software, it's making sure that technical debt is repaid. You're always going to cut corners to go fast, but make sure that those corners are rebuilt, that that technical debt is repaid. There's an anti-pattern around just seeing Agile as about work management. Again, if you're in a software and IT setting, it's making sure that remembering that Agile came from improving software development. Extreme programming has patterns around things like test-driven development, continuous refactoring. You can analogize those to other settings, making sure that if you're improving business processes, that you make those business processes easy to change as well. The third anti-pattern, sub-anti-pattern, is about misaligning teams and architecture learning lessons from Conway's law or team topology. And the final one is thinking that tools or processes are the important things to install when actually all those things are doing is helping smart people deliver better value sooner, safer, and happier. Thanks. Zsolt.
Thank you. So creating a learning organization, it was in the bold that it has one of the biggest challenges, or maybe even the biggest challenge, because it's non-trivial. One of the anti-pattern is information learning silos, the learning bubbles. One of the big anti-pattern, also using data not for learning, but using data as a stick, weaponizing data, lack of psychological safety is also preventing learning organization. The corresponding patterns are optimizing for learning. So how do we create more connectedness across the organization, breaking silos, but also between team of teams, between value stream across the whole organization. How do we optimize for learning? How do we pop the bubbles, the learning bubbles? And also one of the big things is around data, using data for continuous learning, and creating a self-serve access to data to improve outcomes, better value, sooner, safer, happier.
Great. Thank you. And now we have time for some Q&A.
Beautiful. Thanks, team. So the first question comes from Michael, who asks, what have you learned since you published the book? So maybe that's the first part of the question, because the follow-up then is what will make the next edition.
Michael,
So
do you want to come on and ask your question verbally?
Goodness, put me on the spot. Yeah, I'm really interested. I mean, it's a great book first and foremost. So that's more of a comment than a question. But the question is, I'm interested to hear about what you've been learning, and what you're going to add in the next edition of the book that will make it even better.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Michael. So Simon mentioned socio-technical just then, and I think for me, Michael, for me personally, we're at the beginning of a new normal with large organizations around how we organize. And so for me, it's more of the stuff around how we organize across organizations end to end, not just technology. And it's more than socio-technical, it's socio-business technical. So it's the business architect, the business value architecture, the people architecture, and the technical architecture, all three of those things together. Even Conway's law, for those that are familiar with Conway's law, which is an organization is bound to create systems which match the communication structure of the organization, even that is kind of people plus tech. And I think there's a third element, which is the business value architecture. So I think, so Michael, that's for me, that's where I'm doing a lot of thinking, and that's kind of what I've been spending more time on.
Awesome, thank you.
Martin, did you want? Oh, sorry, you go ahead, Zsolt.
Yeah, for me, just what I've been working on is providing data and dashboard ways of working to colleagues. And what I learned and reinforcement is that data mindset is so hard. So achieving data mindset is not as easy as we provide some of the industry standard metrics, but it's crucial. It's a huge enabler to providing in a self-serve way, so that people actually can get data the way they want. They can get data real time, anytime they want, and so they can start using it for continuous improvement. That's a big learning.
Thank you.
Simon, anything to add? Or Myles, did you want to add anything?
Go on, Myles, please.
Oh, well, I was, from my side, yeah, I mean, I was going to say we've all learned a pretty big lesson about COVID, haven't we? When we left, we wrote the book, we thought about, ways of working related to agile and lean. And now we all know that ways of working equally relates to working from home. So there's a much broader topic there that, we've seen come into play. And it's been lovely to see how, or not lovely, but I suppose reassuring to see how teams that I observe working in lean and agile ways that have the kind of culture we're talking about in Sooner, Safer, Happier, those teams have been far more resilient to the changes that have been hitting them over the years than other teams. So in particular with the COVID working from home thing, I've really observed teams being far more resilient in that environment than in others. And so that's been quite interesting to me to observe. I hadn't expected that. Simon.
I think you guys have covered everything I would. We've got plenty more questions. Let's move on.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Simon. Martin, did you want to go next with your question around value? Because it's a great one. Did you want to come off and ask it?
Okay, yeah, I'm off mute. So Martin Chesbrough, the question is, and value is one of these things that has intrigued me for many years. There's a book that probably some of you might have read, the Mark Schwartz Art of Business Value, which I think is sort of seminal in the idea of saying, well, value is what the customer perceives is valuable, and getting to the root of value, especially within large corporations where you've got complex and pre-existing revenue streams, may be very well orientated and understand where value comes from, but any innovation tends to have a very long and circuitous route to value. I'm working with a large organization at the moment that the goal is $100 million opportunity, and that might be 2 or 3 years down the road. and how do you bite off the pieces of the elephant to get you there? What's the sort of, how do you benchmark learning within that sort of place? I mean, I do quite like your phrase, the impediment is the learning, but sort of turning that into reality is something that I struggle with. Mm-hmm. So appreciate your insights, advice, thoughts on that. It's a big topic.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin. And Martin, good to see you on here. And thanks for your followership on social media. So I'm you're active on social media, so it's great to actually have a chat with you in person. So for me, speaking personally, the unlock is OKRs. OKRs done well, and that's why at the center of the circle I had value measured through OKRs, and it's the KR in OKR. Key results. And because the future is unknowable, because we're in the complex domain in Cynefin, we're not in the complicated domain in Cynefin, all we can do is probe, sense, and respond. All we can do is run experiments. That's all we can do. The only way we can learn is by doing. And, and to quote Dave Snowden, acting in the space changes the space. So the mere act of acting, even just being in the system changes the system. Our presence changes the system. So basically, short answer is OKRs, which are written as outcome hypotheses, not OKRs, which are written as output or even written as objectives. They should be written as an outcome hypothesis. And you might have noticed on social media last week, the OKR canvas went live on Miraverse, and that's very deliberately set up to make you write it as due to this belief. We believe that this capability will result in this outcome. We know we're successful when, bottom left, leading indicators, which answers part of your question. Bottom right, lagging value indicators. So the leading indicators, and you actually, in the question, you mentioned it yourself. How do we slice something? So there's an answer in the question, which is what I find works is you've got your kind of 3-year goal, double click, you've got your 1-year goal, double click, quarterly goals, double click, monthly experiments, weekly iterations, daily stories, hourly tasks, and you've got the golden thread of value, you've got alignment. So then in an innovation context, you can see how your experiments align to the multi-year outcome. That has key results. So it could be revenue, profitability, customer happiness, first-time buyers on the property ladder, whatever, fewer homeless people. Value is in the eyes of the beholder, and that's the beauty of the key results. So I'm going to pause there.
Yeah, I haven't taken a look at that OKR canvas. I saw it on social, and I was going to take a look at it. I love the idea of the outcome hypothesis. And I think I'm probably burnt by the fact that I've seen a lot of bad OKRs.
Yeah. It's easy to do anything badly, including Agile, including OKRs. Yeah, take a look at chapter 5 would be my advice. And there's a talk I did, okay, not okay, OKRs.
Yeah. No, good advice. Yep. Thanks for that.
Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Martin. So we've got a question here from Evan. Evan, if you're there, if you want to pop yourself off mute around principle 3 about invite over inflict. Did you want to ask that one?
Yeah, thanks, Maria. So my question is really on this principle, love the principle, and we should always invite people and bring them on a journey. But at times, especially when we start to scale, I know you said, don't scale at the beginning, but at a certain point when we want all the, broader team to get the benefit, you want to scale, right? So especially when at the scale phase, you almost want to set the standard, bring alignment, but that's kind of a tricky question because you still want to bring people on the journey, but at the same time, you need to tell them what to do and to help them to go through the Shuhari stages. So how do you balance that? And how do you kind of, still applying the principle, but actually bring alignment.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. Just going to see if Myles, Zsolt, or Simon, if any of you want to get this one. If not, I'm happy to.
Evan.
John, why don't you take this one?
Okay. So, Evan, thank you for the question. Advice: appeal to intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation. If it appeals to internal motivation, you're far more likely to be successful. So, diffusion of innovation curve, 508 studies. This is how people embrace change. There are your three standard deviations from the mean, your innovators, and then your early adopters, early adopters, and then early majority. So I think I'm going to do a little play on words. It's an invitation to the infliction. So there is a downside to it being purely invitation only. And to be clear, there is, I'm going to do a bit of role playing. To be clear, across our organization, so imagine I'm on the leadership team of an organization. We want to improve how we do what we do. We want to improve our outcomes. We want to deliver better value sooner, safer, and happier. Dear organization, this is a top 3 priority for our company to improve how we do what we do to get better outcomes. And as a top 3 priority, you are all incentivized to improve how you do what you do, measured by quality, value, time to value, safety, and happiness. They balance each other out. Now, dear organization, I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'm not going to inflict one way of working across all of you. Here is a support function. Here's your ways of working, center of enablement. Here are some coaches. We're going to start small. We're going to learn in our unique context, and then we're going to ramp up. So Evan, I'm going to stop the role play now. The key point there is there's an incentive, which is it's improving, not agile, not scaling framework, but improving is articulated as a incentivized outcome across the company. So then you have an incentive, and then it's who wants to go first. And then Evan, what I've seen happen is you get your innovators who are, like Simon said, oh, I've been working for, like me as well, I've been 10 years at this organization trying to do better ways of working despite the company, not because of the company. We were the Rebel Alliance. We were the renegades. Now, oh, thank goodness we can do it because of the company. So you get your Rebel Alliance, you ask forgiveness, not permission at the beginning. You ramp your way up, and then you have the fast follower video, the guy crazy dancing on the hill. Then you get people starting to come over in bigger volumes, and they're choosing to go, oh wow, that looks good. I want some of that. I'm hearing really good, great stuff. And then you get into the late majority, and in my experience, Evan, getting into that late majority, figuratively speaking, I had my feet on the desk. It just tipped by itself. There's a ninja move in there, which is we got internal audit. We made sure that internal audit were our best friends from day one. So when internal audit went around auditing teams and change, internal audit were tipping the teams into the new standard, into better ways of working. So for the laggards, like our job was done. We'd rewritten the standards, John Cotter's 8 steps to change. Step number 8, institutionalize the change. And then internal audit, we're just going around tipping the teams, and nobody questions an internal audit report. Like you've got a red on your internal audit, you're going to get it done. And this was with coaching and support and a feedback loop. So Zsolt was running a quarterly colleague survey, and we were taking the colleague survey and we were taking what colleagues were saying, and that was influencing our strategy for the next quarter. So there was a very clear kind of you said, we listened feedback loop. So yeah.
One thing I would add is that a huge enabler is communication. This sense, so keep sharing. Show and tells on the product or individual team level, regular show and tell, but also communities of practices, running an award, asking teams how much they improved outcomes. So there are lots of practices. Keep improving connectedness. That really helps.
And also, sorry, just to add one other thing as well. You used the word alignment in your question, Evan. There are minimal viable guardrails. There are some things that are not negotiable. It's not the Wild West. Like in particular, role names. We don't want 15 types of Scrum Master or Agile Project Lead or Agile Team Lead. So minimal viable guardrails, consistent roles, consistent role definitions, number one. Number two, there are some things that are not negotiable, like information security, data privacy, fraud, anti-money laundering. So, that's chapter 7, the bit about risk. So within the minimal viable guardrails, knock yourself out.
It's great. You actually answered 2 of my questions. Thank you. It's perfect.
Great. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Evan. So we might, there's 2 questions in here around kind of how do you get started. One from Tim in the context of minimum conditions that you look for from an organization before you attempt to help them with BVSSH. And another one from Joe around where would you start if you've been working on a big agile transformation for 3 years. So slightly different, but all around kind of how do you get started that I thought might be worth getting into. So Tim, did you want to maybe provide a little bit more context first before they get into it?
Sure. Thanks, Maria. And look, it's perhaps a slightly facetious question, but is there an organization, could you talk about an organization you just would walk away from rather than trying to lean in and help become better, sooner, safer, happier?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I mean,
go on, Myles.
Sure, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say I've certainly seen a couple of those where we have and where where we see there's a real emphasis on tools and process and not very much interest in the cultural change. That's a red flag that we know we're not going to spend too much time there. If this is purely a tools and process type engagement. In order to recognize, where we would start, where we do, the conditions for success for us to go in, or for me to go in, I should say, and actually help is usually interest. If there's genuine interest from a leader at any level in exerting some kind of cultural and overall change, then absolutely that's what you need is the beginning of the S curve, is the cohort of people that are really interested and motivated and wanting to make a difference. So that's the conditions for success, is that you have the appetite and interest, and the anti-pattern is only a tool or a process type approach.
And I guess I'd add to that, Myles, it's leaders who don't want to change themselves. They want the organization below them to change, but they're not prepared to embrace any change in their own ways of working. I apologies, which I forget which chapter it is, but leaders go first. Leaders need to change themselves and focus on outcomes and understand why they want the change rather than just imposing something.
And the other thing to add to that, Tim, is if there are people in the organization who want to, in quotes, do sooner, safer, happier, a bit like do agile or do scaling framework, and with an unrealistic expectation of timescale. So the narrative here is this is a multi-year journey which requires persistent and determination and incentive. And if you're not prepared for this to be like dear Exco, if you're not prepared for this to be a multi-year journey, don't bother.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Joe, did you want to give a little bit of context to your question on the how might you change given you're already on an agile transformation journey?
Sure. So if you've already been on that multi-year journey and you're getting okay results, I know everyone's results can be debatable, but you do have areas that are maturing from nothing to being slightly more mature. How would you introduce, say, for Sooner Happier with a team or a group that's really interested? Like you can hear the leader not only talking the talk, but walking it as well. Where would you start? Would you start, like chapter 1, chapter 5, chapter whatever? Yeah.
What I'd say is, Joe, thanks for the question. I'd say it's a combination of chapter 1 and chapter 8, focus on outcomes and learning organization. And what I'm immediately thinking is data. Because so you're already on the journey, you've already got some success. So it's not like it's an alien concept. But in order to focus on the outcomes, you need to be measuring the outcomes. So if currently there's not measurement of quality, value, time to value, safety, and happiness, then what I would recommend is starting to measure that and visualize it. And then you've got your data feedback loop. And Joe, you've frozen on my screen, so I don't know if you can hear this. You've then got your data feedback loop, so then you can improve aligned to the outcomes. I think we might have lost Joe.
That's okay. We can go to the next question from Brendan, if Brendan's still there, around, because it's a nice follow on from Simon's point around leaders. So any thoughts on how we can help educate, coach employees on how to treat leaders to get the best out of them? Brendan, if you're there, did you want to pop yourself off mute and ask your question a little bit further, or I can keep going?
No, that's all right. I can give a quick little bit of further context. So I think it's just with my background more in psychology as well, it's so easy to have people with the best intent wanting to lead the way, but it's the large body of people around them are projecting certain expectations onto these leaders that actually makes it very hard for the leader to not show up in a different way, where they actually almost as an employee feel quite comfortable for the leader to tell them what to do and to actually give so much direction that they're actually still too prescriptive in the way they go about. And that's just one example of it. So are there some tips that we can actually help to empower these individuals to say, hey, well, let's just give the platform to the leaders as well, to enable them to in turn be these leaders we want to have in our organization going forward. So yeah, let me know if you need more context, but that's kind of the thinking around it.
So Brendan, I'd say one of the techniques that we found quite helpful is thinking in terms of what questions to ask. So very, very practically, as a leader, there are some things you can be doing, and how you communicate with others, how you ask and talk to those other people around you really influences the behavior that you see back. So if you're asking questions around, what experiments might we run next? How can we improve our rate of learning? How can we improve what we're doing? How we do what we do. If those are the kinds of questions that as a leader we're asking, then you're helping your organization to start thinking in the right way. So asking the right questions is a good tip in my experience. And a second area, if I was going to put my finger on one, was really around the visualize. Trying to make the work visible so that you can focus on the work and on the outcomes of the work, and through visualization boards, visualization rooms, and then actually role modeling with your leadership team. Spending time openly, transparently, having the prioritization conversations at the wall, as opposed to in a locked space. With sort of unclear decision-making processes around you. So transparency, openness, and the right questions. Those are what I touch on at this stage.
Thanks, Myles.
Brendan, a thought to add is, so in terms of how we, in quotes, can make it easier for other leaders, to add to what Myles said, another thought is there's a bit of a ninja move you can do with what you put under people's noses. So if historically it's been a case of putting a Gantt chart with predetermined milestones, and the definition of success is a milestone on a Gantt chart put together 18 months ago at the point of having learnt the least, the ninja move is you put an OKR under the nose of people, and you can ninja move this into, let's look at the key results. Let's look at how the value is moving. And you don't have to ask permission for this. You can still have the Gantt chart on slide 2. But I've done this where we ninja move the conversation actually to the outcome. And I just want to check for this project we've been running for the last 3 years that hasn't delivered any value, what actually is the desired outcome? Let's just refresh our memory on that. And then how can we deliver value in the next 3 months or 1 month or week? You know, from the kind of white elephant thing. So there's a bit of a ninja move with OKRs. And then another thought, Brendan, is the selfish gene. Everybody has a selfish gene. Understand what problem it is that's keeping leaders. I don't like us and them, like, you know, they're leaders, we're not. Everyone's a leader, but other people in the organization who might have a bigger span of control and influence, understand what's keeping people awake at night. What problems do people have? And then we might have some solutions to the problem, as opposed to we want to do agile, you know, or even do sooner, safer, happier. You know what I mean? So it could be value, it could be market share, it could be attrition. So just understand what people's selfish gene is, and then help them with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks. I can still hear the principle of pull. At play in all of what you're saying. So it's a great concept just to cling to. Sorry guys, I thought my video was on, but for some other reason I can't get it sharing. It's not on purpose.
No worries, Brendan. Thanks for your question. Well, I think on that note, we might wrap it up here because we've just ticked over the hour. I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for joining today, and for the authors to have a bit of a presentation, a bit of Q&A. I will be capturing the chat because there's some unanswered questions. It did go by quickly. There are some unanswered questions around some of the other patterns, which I'll capture and get some of a response from the authors so that I can share those back with you. To be able to get those, I'd suggest joining our Slack channel if you're not already a community member there, or they'll be through Meetup too. So please join that way. And just before we wrap up, 2 things to tell you all. Hopefully this has inspired those who haven't read the book to get the book. Thank you for the messages. And we will be running a book club in 2023 to kick off chapter by chapter, a bit of a conversation as an Asia Pacific community. So watch out for those in the Meetup invite. Thanks, Carl, for your inspiration on that book club. Awesome. And as per usual, we'll have a bit of a Zoom survey, so please do fill that out. But I hope everyone enjoyed today's time, and your feedback in Zoom helps us to shape up the next session. So thanks everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everybody, bye.